Reid Blackman is founder and CEO of the AI ethical risk consultancy Virtue, and he's joining us from New York. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. What are your main concerns about all of this?
There are a host of concerns. I think that the ones that were just articulated are the right ones. So you think about automation or AI in weapon systems, that's quite concerning. One thing to note here is that it only takes one actor to use it, one state actor to use it. So if one side in a war is using AI to make automated decisions, that means those decisions are being made extremely rapidly, far too fast for any person to track and respond to. And so the only response to an aggressor who's using AI in some capacity is also to use AI. But then you can see how things can spin out of control rather quickly, since you have two AIs operating against each other, not capable of being overseen by humans because they're just moving too fast. That's certainly one of the larger concerns in this context. The other one, disinformation, clearly a very serious problem. One thing to note is that it's not just state actors that are the problem. It's also the fact that this technology has been, as people like to say, democratized. It's available or accessible to most any individual with a computer and an internet connection. And so the worry is not just that state actors can destabilize countries, but also individual lone actors acting without at least the explicit direction of any state.
It's going to be difficult for countries, though, isn't it, to be able to try and find some sort of common ground, some sort of element of control, whether it's legislative or anything else, when one can almost be certain that the militaries of those countries and the security apparatuses of those countries are going to be working their hardest to try to make AI work for them, possibly in the worst way possible. How do you make that balance? How does that work? Is it realistic to think that any sort of controls could actually be put in place?
I'm somewhat skeptical. So if you think about, for instance, the European Union AI Act, which is winding its way through the legislative process, it's been several years. There's a specific carve out for military applications. So the EU is not anywhere close to doing this, let alone the countries that are members of the United Nations. So even if a conversation is started, we're talking about many, many years until we would actually see anything. And it's not clear how it would be enforced. It's not clear that the level of agreement can be specific enough to actually guide action on the ground. And the other thing is that in many cases, what you need is the cooperation of the tech companies, of those platforms that are creating and distributing these AI tools. So if you don't get their cooperation, states can come to whatever agreement they want. Then there's a question about to what extent can we get the platforms to actually comply?
I want to ask you about the timeline about all of this. Whenever we talk about AI, it's always referred to as something that's happening at lightning speed. It's happening and developing incredibly quickly. Yet, science fiction writers have been telling us from early days, back in the 1960s, there was Colossus, the Forbes project is the one that immediately comes to mind for people of my era, who have been talking about the potential of AIs joining forces and exactly this kind of thing, this risk, at least, happening. Are we coming to this too late? Have the governments around the world and developers around the world been essentially closing their minds to this situation, and all of a sudden now they're trying to play catch-up?
Right. Well, this has come fast and slow. It's come slow in the sense that these kind of warnings have been around for decades. It's slow in that talking about AI or the algorithms that are behind much of AI were developed in the 50s. But then it happened very fast once we got the processing power, once we got the quantity of data from the internet. Now it's moving quite quickly. I don't think it's too late. I mean, we're not dead yet. That's the optimistic take. We're not dead yet, so there's still time. But, it's going to be, I've been following this very closely for over 5 years to see how governments are responding, to see how corporations are responding, and they are extremely slow. Their response is much slower than the pace at which the technology is advancing. So if you just take generative AI, for example, there is a tremendous amount of money being poured into making these technologies more advanced than they already are. There's headlines in the AI world every day, especially among data scientists who are really technologists following this. So we're going to see a lot more advancement in the very near future, and government is very far behind. And just understanding what we had with AI before generative AI, and now that we have generative AI, there's even more to understand, and there's a greater distance between what's going on the ground and what's coming to be, on the one hand, and on the other hand, government's ability to understand what it is.
Well, we appreciate you being with us. If there's one piece of optimism we can take away, it's we're not dead yet. Thank you very much indeed,
We're not
Reid
dead
Blackman.
yet.
Reid Blackman, thank
Thanks
you
so
very
much.
much indeed for being with us on Al Jazeera.